My wife left me 37 miles from home in the rain to teach me a lesson. She thought I was a helpless victim she could break. She didn't know I'd been recording everything for 8 months. My brother was waiting nearby, and my revenge was already in motion. I remember hitting record on my phone, my finger steady, before slipping it back into my pocket just as Victoria's pearl white Mercedes pulled into the deserted rest stop. The rain hadn't started yet, but you could smell it on the air, that heavy, electric scent of ozone and wet earth. A storm was coming, in more ways than one. "Get out," she said. She didn't even bother to turn off the engine. Its low purr, a constant, arrogant hum. Her eyes were fixed on the windshield. "You need a lesson, Marcus. Maybe walking home will teach you some respect." 37 miles. She'd calculated it perfectly. It was a dead zone for cell service, too far for a cab to bother with, and too remote for any kind of public transportation. She was stranding me. What she didn't know is that I'd been recording her abuse for 8 months, and that my sister, Rachel, was already parked just out of sight behind the abandoned gas station, waiting for my signal. The leather seat creaked as I turned to face her, to really look at her. Victoria's jaw was set in that familiar, satisfied line, the one she always wore when she closed a particularly ruthless deal at her real estate development firm. It was the look of a woman who believed she had won. Just 3 hours earlier, we'd been at the Gilded Sparrow, a fancy steakhouse, celebrating our anniversary. I wore the charcoal suit she liked. I laughed at her jokes. I played the part. Now she was abandoning me on a lonely highway because I'd finally asked the question that had been eating at me for weeks. Why had $10,000 vanished from our joint savings account? "Are you really going to do this, Victoria?" I kept my voice perfectly steady, a calm surface on a raging sea. I needed my phone to capture every single damning word. "Actions have consequences, Marcus," she sneered, finally turning to look at me. Her eyes were like chips of ice. "You went behind my back. You called my accountant. You humiliated me with your paranoid questions. Maybe a long walk in the rain will remind you who handles the money in this family." I didn't mention the silver cufflink I'd found under our bed 2 days ago. It wasn't mine. I knew with a sickening certainty that it belonged to my stepbrother, Derek, the same Derek she had just hired as her new project manager. The $10,000 had probably bought him something nice to go with it, but I didn't say his name. Not yet. Everything had to happen in the right order, just as my lawyer, Charles, and I had rehearsed. "It's going to pour," I said, my voice quiet, gesturing to the darkening sky. "Then you'd better start walking," she replied, her fingers drumming a triumphant rhythm on the steering wheel. "Unless you want to apologize right now. Admit you were wrong. 6 months ago, I would have apologized. I would have begged. 6 months ago, I still held on to the foolish hope that our marriage could be saved. That was before I found the second set of her company's accounting books hidden in the back of her closet. Before the mysterious withdrawals. Before I discovered she'd been systematically transferring our assets into accounts only she controlled. The moment I started asking questions, she'd turned cruel. Tonight wasn't a beginning, it was an escalation. But it was also her downfall. "I'll walk," I said, my hand closing on the door handle. A slow, cruel smile spread across her face. "Good choice. Maybe by the time you get home, you'll remember your place." I stepped out onto the cracked asphalt. The rest stop was a relic of a forgotten time, a dark building with boarded up windows and a parking lot being reclaimed by weeds. She'd chosen it specifically for its isolation. She'd even pointed it out last week as we drove by. "Imagine getting stranded out here," she'd said with a little laugh. "Miles from anywhere." That's when I knew what she was planning. The Mercedes engine roared as she lowered the passenger window. She was probably texting him, texting Derek, telling him the job was done. Then she sped off, her tires squealing on the worn pavement, leaving me alone in the gathering gloom. I stood there perfectly still and counted to 60. I watched her taillights disappear around the bend. Then I turned and walked calmly toward the abandoned gas station. Just as planned, Rachel's black Jeep Cherokee was hidden behind it. My sister stepped out, a large umbrella in one hand and a thermos of coffee in the other. She didn't say, "I told you so," though she had every right to. She just looked at my face, her own edged with a quiet, protective anger. "Did you get everything?" she asked. "Every word," I said, pulling out my phone and finally stopping the recording. The relief was a physical thing, a weight lifting from my chest. Rachel just shook her head, her grip tightening on the umbrella. "4 years of watching her control you is bad enough, but this," she gestured to the desolate rest stop, "this is criminal abandonment. Charles is going to love this." I accepted the coffee, the warmth of the thermos seeping into my cold hands. The first fat drops of rain were beginning to fall. By morning, Victoria would think I'd spent the night walking through the storm broken, humiliated, and soaked to the bone. She would expect to find me on the front doorstep, a pathetic mess, ready to beg for her forgiveness. She had no idea. "Is Daniel ready?" I asked, taking a sip of the hot coffee. It tasted like salvation. "He's been monitoring the accounts all night," Rachel confirmed. "The moment she transferred the 10 grand this afternoon, he documented it all. His forensic audit goes back 2 years. She's been siphoning money into offshore accounts. She was planning to divorce you once she'd hidden enough to leave you with nothing." The word divorce hung in the air, but it had lost its sting. It was no longer a threat, it was a promise. "And Charles is filing the emergency papers at 9 a.m., I added, the plan clicking into place. "Abandonment, financial abuse, fraud. With tonight's recording, Victoria won't know what hit her." We climbed into Rachel's Jeep just as the sky opened up. I thought of Victoria driving home, so pleased with her cruel little lesson. She had no idea that when she she started hiding money 8 months ago. I started building an army. Rachel had installed the cameras in our house. Daniel, my old college roommate and now a forensic accountant specializing in financial abuse cases, had traced every single dollar, and Charles Whitmore, one of the most ruthless divorce attorneys in the state, had built a file that now filled 3 large boxes. The house recordings uploaded properly, Rachel said, checking her phone. We've got her on camera last Tuesday, bringing him to the house while you were visiting Dad. They used your bed, Marcus. I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. It wasn't heartbreak that had died months ago. It was resolve. A hard, crystalline resolve. She's been planning this for a while, I said, my voice even. The escalation, the financial control, the isolation from my friends. Charles says it's a classic pattern. He also says judges don't look kindly on spouses who abandon their partners on the side of a highway as punishment. Rachel drove carefully through the storm, taking the back roads we'd mapped out weeks ago. Every detail mattered. The hotel room was reserved under my mother's maiden name, paid for with cash. The clothes I'd need were already there. She's going to look for you when you don't show up, Rachel said. Let her, I said. It was time to play my part, the role of the traumatized husband, abandoned and afraid. Tomorrow, Victoria would learn who really needed a lesson. The hotel lobby was blindingly bright. Water dripped from my hair onto the marble floor as I approached the counter, making my hands shake just enough to be convincing. The clerk, a young man with concerned eyes, looked up with alarm. Sir, are you all right? My wife, I managed, letting my voice crack. She left me at a rest stop in the storm. His face went from concern to horror. Perfect. Every word would be documented in the hotel's incident report, a formal record of my distress, just as Charles had instructed. Room 412 was small but clean. I locked the door, slid the chain across, and finally let myself breathe. The performance was over. For now, I pulled out my second phone, the burner phone Rachel had given me, and played the recording from the car. Victoria's voice filled the room, even and measured. You think you're so smart, don't you? Calling my accountant, asking questions as if you have any clue what the answers even mean. My own voice came next, carefully controlled. It's our money, Victoria. I have a right to know. Her laugh was a sharp, ugly bark. Our money? I earn it. I manage it. You teach high school English. You grade papers about the Great Gatsby while I close million-dollar deals. You spent $400 on those ridiculous first edition books last month. Marcus, I remembered that purchase. I'd bought those books with birthday money from my father. The same father Victoria refused to let me visit more than twice a year because it interfered with her schedule. She had rewritten our history so many times, chipping away at my confidence, that sometimes even I forgot the truth. My burner phone vibrated. A text from Daniel. Eleanor found something. 3 more accounts in the Cayman Islands. She's been moving money for 18 months. Eleanor Chen was Daniel's colleague, a forensic specialist who'd worked with the FBI before going private. She joined our case pro bono after Daniel explained the situation. Another text, this time from Charles. Judge Harrison accepted an emergency hearing for tomorrow at 2 p.m. Bring the recording. Judge William Harrison. He had a reputation for seeing right through people like Victoria. Charles had waited for weeks, specifically for an opening on his docket. My personal phone rang. Victoria. I let it go to voicemail, then played the message on speaker, recording it with my second phone. Marcus, this is ridiculous. The lesson is learned. Okay, call me and I'll come get you. 10 minutes later, another call. I know you have your phone. Stop being childish and call me back. Find your own way home. But I could hear it. A slight tremor of nervousness. She was starting to realize something wasn't right. I'd always called by now. I'd always apologized. My silence was breaking her script. At midnight, a number I didn't recognize called. I answered, staying silent. Hello, Marcus. His voice was uncertain. It's Derek. Victoria asked me to call you. She's worried. She'd sent her affair partner to deliver a fake, second-hand apology. I hung up without saying a word. By 1 a.m., the calls were coming every 15 minutes. Victoria, her mother, her business partner. I documented every single one. At 2:30 a.m., a text came in from my elderly neighbor. Saw Victoria in the driveway with a flashlight, looking under your car. She just left in a hurry. She was looking for my car, not knowing Rachel had moved it to a long-term parking garage across town 2 days ago. It was another piece for Charles. Evidence that I'd been planning to leave, that her cruel act had only accelerated my timeline. The courthouse halls were all marble and dark mahogany, designed to make you feel small. But I didn't feel small. I walked in wearing my sharpest suit, my armor. Charles was at my side, a silent, powerful presence. Rachel flanked my other side, a protective shadow. Victoria was already there, next to her lawyer, the infamous Lydia Carmichael. Victoria looked smaller than I remembered, her usual imposing presence diminished by her rumpled clothes and the dark circles under her eyes. When she saw me, her expression shifted from exhaustion to pure rage. We are here for an emergency petition filed by Marcus Bradley. Judge Harrison began, his voice crisp. Miss Carmichael, I see you were retained this morning. Yes, Your Honor, Carmichael said smoothly. We respectfully request a continuance. Denied, Judge Harrison said without looking up. Your client allegedly abandoned her husband in dangerous conditions last night. Time is of the essence. Counselor, present your evidence. Charles stood, his voice like silk with an edge of steel. Your Honor, at approximately 8:47 p.m. last night, Victoria Bradley deliberately abandoned my client at an isolated rest stop 37 miles from their home during a severe weather advisory. We have an audio recording. He pressed play. Victoria's voice filled the silent courtroom, cold and clear. "You need a lesson, Marcus. Maybe walking home will teach you some respect." The color drained from Victoria's face. "Furthermore," Charles continued, "Mrs. Bradley has been systematically concealing marital assets for the past 18 months. We have documentation of offshore accounts totaling over $8 million and evidence of embezzlement from her real estate development firm." He held up a thick stack of documents. "Exhibit A, Your Honor, wire transfers to accounts in the Cayman Islands." Judge Harrison reviewed them, his expression darkening. He fixed his gaze on Victoria. "Mrs. Bradley, did you or did you not abandon your husband last night?" "Your Honor, it was a misunderstanding," she stammered. "It's a yes or no question, Mrs. Bradley." "Yes, I did," she blurted out. "But he had his phone. He could have called someone." The judge's eyebrows raised a fraction of an inch. "How very considerate of you." Just as Charles was about to present the next exhibit, the main courtroom doors opened. A man in a conservative suit entered, followed by 2 federal agents. I recognized him from the pictures Daniel had shown me, Special Agent Michael Torres from the SEC. Victoria's head snapped around, and for the first time, I saw genuine, primal fear in her eyes. "Your Honor," Agent Torres said, addressing the judge directly, "apologies for the interruption. We have a warrant for the arrest of Victoria Bradley on charges of wire fraud and embezzlement." Carmichael leaped to her feet, her professional calm shattering. "Your Honor, this is a circus. So is stealing $3 million from your investors' escrow accounts, Miss Carmichael," Judge Harrison replied dryly. As Victoria sat, ashen-faced, the courtroom doors burst open again. It was Derek. His designer polo was wrinkled, his hair disheveled. "You said you were separated," he shouted, his voice cracking, echoing off the marble walls. "You said he was unstable. I have texts. I have recordings. You promised the money was ours." Agent Torres's eyes lit up with professional interest. He approached Derek carefully, as one might approach a startled deer. "Sir," he said, his voice calm and reassuring, "we'd very much like to speak with you." That was it. Victoria's destruction was complete. Her affair partner was about to hand-deliver even more evidence to the federal government. Judge Harrison's gavel slammed down. "I am granting the emergency order in its entirety. All marital assets are to be frozen. Mr. Bradley is granted exclusive use of the marital home, and Mrs. Bradley will provide temporary spousal support of $10,000 a month." $10,000 a month. Victoria exploded, rising from her chair. "That's insane, Mrs. Bradley." The judge's voice was like cracking ice. "You abandoned your husband on the side of a highway after hiding millions of dollars. Frankly, I am being generous." As the marshals prepared to lead her away, her carefully constructed image as a brilliant, powerful woman had collapsed in on itself in less than an hour. And right there, as they prepared to lead her away in cuffs, I knew my old life was truly over. But my new story was just beginning. The courthouse steps were a madhouse. Microphones and cameras were thrust in my face. Charles guided me through the crowd to where Rachel was waiting with her Jeep. By the 6 p.m. news, Victoria's face, and probably mine, was on every local channel. The story went national. Prominent real estate developer arrested for embezzlement following spousal abandonment incident. Derek's tearful, messy Instagram live confession, where he posted screenshots of their texts and pictures of their lavish trips, went viral. Victoria's company Facebook page imploded. Investors demanded their money back. Former employees shared stories of suspicious activity. And Victoria's mother issued a formal statement. Victoria Bradley is a respectable member of the community who has been victimized by a calculating man who married her for her money. No one bought it. The trial was a formality. For 11 days, a parade of witnesses defrauded investors, former employees, Daniel, Derek, even a hidden daughter Victoria had been paying to keep silent for 19 years took the stand and buried her. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all charges. The judge sentenced her to 8 years in federal prison. As the marshals led her away, she turned and looked at me, her eyes filled with a venomous hatred. "This isn't over, Marcus," she shouted. I stood up, my voice clear and steady. "You're right, Victoria. The civil lawsuits begin next month." The whistleblower's reward from the SEC arrived 6 weeks later, a check for $1.2 million, a percentage of the stolen funds the government recovered thanks to our information. Combined with the assets the court awarded me, I suddenly had the resources to do something meaningful. Rachel found the building first, a renovated brownstone in downtown Portland. We signed the lease, and the Phoenix Foundation had a home. Our mission, to provide legal aid, financial counseling, and emergency resources for men escaping financially abusive relationships, a population so often overlooked, so often disbelieved. Charles took a leave of absence from his firm to help establish our legal aid program. Daniel brought in forensic accountants who volunteered their services. Derek, 6 months sober and carrying a box of donuts as a peace offering, came to volunteer. He now leads our support groups, sharing his own story of how Victoria had exploited his vulnerabilities and addiction. 18 months after that night at the rest stop, I stood in my office looking at a wall covered in thank you cards and photos. 87 people had found their way to safety through our foundation. One of Victoria's victims, an elderly investor she had defrauded, became our biggest donor. The rain was falling again outside, drumming softly against the windows of the brownstone that now housed hope and second chances. I thought of that night, 37 miles from home, standing in the downpour as Victoria drove away, so confident that she had broken me. She thought she was teaching me about power and control. Instead, she taught me that cruelty creates its own destruction, that every action has a consequence, and that sometimes the person you abandon in the rain has already seen the storm coming and is prepared accordingly. Her single act of calculated cruelty became the catalyst for saving people she never believed deserved to be saved. The final lesson, the one Victoria never saw coming, wasn't about obedience or respect. It was about transformation. She tried to leave me powerless in a storm. I became the eye of the hurricane.